Hello, and welcome to another episode of Coach.Better from Maduro Learning. My name is Clint Hamada.
And my name is Kim Capino, and we'll be your hosts for today's episode. Today, we're chatting with Will Kirkwood, Educational Technology Coordinator in the lower school of Zurich International School. Will shares his thoughts on how to reposition his role as a tech coach from having cool experiences and fixing things to engaging in conversations about improving student learning. He also gives us a wealth of advice and strategies for how to collect and use data to see the impact coaching has on student learning. This interview is a goldmine of how to build a successful coaching culture from start to finish. You're going to love it. Hi, Will. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your professional experience, please?
So my name's Will Kirkwood. I'm an Australian citizen. I've been teaching internationally for about 16 years now. I work as the Educational Technology Coordinator at Zurich International School. I'm at the lower school or elementary school. I've been here for 2 stints, actually. I've been here 6 years. This is my 6th year this time. And I was here for 5 years in the stint before. In between that, I was in NIST in Bangkok, where I worked as a tech coach at the lower school and the middle and the upper school at different stages. At various stages of my career, I've been a kindergarten teacher, grade 1 teacher, grade 3 teacher, grade 5 teacher. And I've sort of jumped back and forth between classroom and tech over the years.
Awesome. So you have a lot of insight to draw from in all those different experiences. And I will be so interested if we have the opportunity to compare and contrast, hear a little bit about NIST versus Zurich in the ways that coaching is implemented and how that all works. Because I think similarly, at least curriculum wise, they have kind of a similar perspective on things. So it would be interesting just to hear a little bit about that.
Let's go away. Yeah.
All right. So to kind of get started, as a coach who has moved from school to school, how do you build rapport in your teaching community? What are the routines that you do? How do you make connections with people on a professional level, not just a personal one?
Yeah, it's been a tough sort of question to answer. Over the years, it's been different because in Zurich, both times I returned to a classroom teaching model before going to tech. So I always had the advantage of having some skin in the game in the teaching role. So it sort of made that whole process different for me. So obviously over the years that skin in the game sort of wanes because I didn't work with as many teachers as the change of teachers come through. So recently I've sort of been playing around with the idea, sort of based on the work from Ewan McIntosh. He came along and did some work with us on this whole idea of what menu of services does my department, so technicians and myself, provide. And we've sort of been playing around with this relationship-driven model of sort of, I call it support, but it actually works for all areas. Where as a department, we sort of identify who do we connect. So I have 2 technicians who work in the office with me. Who do we connect with personally first? And we sort of divide up the faculty in that way. And then we actually try and develop that model over time to move beyond personal and go to professional. So we have taken the lens of actually using our relationships that we already have as the basis for expanding to professional. And it's sort of been this really interesting process where for the teachers, they're seeing technicians in a different role. So if they need support, I'm totally happy for my technicians to run a lesson if they want because they have that strong connection. And we've been seeing some really interesting sort of changes in the way that the sort of role is perceived over time. So I guess we're sort of leveraging our personal relationships and in a way to start sort of bridging over to those professional relationships. And has it been perfect? No, but it's just another way of sort of doing it. Obviously, over the years, I've sort of made sure I've gone into the cafeteria and ate lunch with people. I've gone through and sort of run lessons or set up things for people and build up sort of my bank of points, let's say, with brownie points with different teachers. But we're just trying to sort of refocus of how, let's say, our department's positioned and the way it's perceived with different people. So it's been an interesting evolution. We're sort of trying this concept of, we call milk rounds, but every morning at least one of us will walk around the school and just chat to people, but actually meet them in their space as opposed to waiting for them to come to our space to ask a question or seek tech help. So we're trying to push out our support and advice model and sort of meeting people where they're at. And in that way, it's sort of really helping deepen the conversations, but also people are feeling more supported because when an issue comes up, we're semi-regularly around to their room and they can just say it, as opposed to having to walk down the stairs and find us or drop us an email. So we're sort of trying to play with that relationship model.
I like that idea of physically meeting people where they're at, as well as mentally and, in a support-wise, meeting people where they're at in terms of, what they're able to do or what they're thinking about. I think that makes a huge, huge difference. And I also think what you said to start with it, you started as a classroom teacher and have moved into a tech coaching role kind of in both of your iterations at Zurich. And I think that helps to build a lot of credibility. And initially, because like you said, you do have skin in the game, you understand and you are aware of all of the time pressures or deadlines that those classroom teachers have, and it's something that is forefront in your mind. I think sometimes it is easy to forget or to take for granted some of the time luxuries that coaches may have because they don't have the classroom deadlines. We have other types of deadlines and other pressures, but not always the same time pressures.
Totally. It's sort of, we've been, as sort of all the so non-classroom teachers, let's call it, and sort of thinking about how our role impacts student learning and how best we can support those people who, call it on the front line, but the people who are interacting with the kids the most, how can we support them to further their instruction? So sort of redefining how you think of how do you support student learning. In my case, sometimes my students are faculty, and how best can I help them support student learning instead of playing around with it. So it's been an interesting evolution. I'm sure we can get more into it.
Sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
In your model where you were working initially with the people you have personal relationships with and kind of spreading that out amongst your team of 3 total people, was there anybody who slipped through the cracks? Like, how did you make sure, my question really is, how did you make sure everybody got the support that they needed? Did you make lists? Did you just have a list of the faculty and you're like, oh, I know this person, I'm friends with this person, I go biking with this person, and then everyone was all taken care of? Or did you have to be strategic about anything?
Initially, I know, so we drew from the work of sort of Diane Sweeney and Jim Knight on instructional coaching and sort of the importance of building relationships. Initially, we work with, Jim Knight's little phrase is a coalition of the willing. So you work with those ones which are the easy gains as you sort of finding your feet and you're learning your model. And then slowly as that evolved, we started sort of looking at lists of faculty and sort of dividing it up and sort of seeing where our relationships are, but identifying what we sort of called stretch goals of the ones which no one was traditionally identifying with. And then sort of really targeting those people and sort of making it a stretch goal for us to move beyond and sort of think about for ourselves of why haven't we developed that relationship and how best can we support them. So it's it obviously evolved over time, and is it there yet? Totally not. Will some people fall for the cracks? Yes, but we're slowly sort of developing more processes as the word of mouth goes around, I guess, of this is the sort of thing that we're trying to do, and Will can do this, or someone else can do that. Slowly that sort of evolves over time. So hopefully we're getting more people before they fall through the cracks.
And I think one of the things that we always come up with in all these conversations is that the pace of the coaches is not always the pace of the school. But if you look at it a little bit like this, it's almost easier to stay with the pace of the school because you're almost identifying those relationships that kind of happen because people are interested, as opposed to if you go in and say to yourself, okay, I have to work with everybody, not everybody's going to be on par at the same pace with you. So I think that's an interesting way to think about allowing word of mouth, like you said, to let it spread, because then those people might be ready to work with you and they might not have been in the first year.
I guess it's that sort of shifting mindset of, for me, it's been shifting to a longer term mindset of it. Not because I'm here for longer term, but seeing people's growth over time as opposed to they need to do this lesson or this experience in order to do it. So it's sort of supporting that, for us, a professional growth model where you're looking at the development over time as opposed to just this short-term gain of I've done something. And that mindset it forces a rethink in how you do things.
Mm. So it sounds like a lot of what you're talking about. I mean, I don't know what year in this process you are in, but I mean, it's really about building that culture of coaching and that culture of support within your staff and within the whole school community. You've talked a little bit about kind of how you've started, right, by kind of meeting them where they are. What are some other things that you and your team are doing to sort of advocate for the importance of the role that you're filling, or to kind of put yourself in front and center in front of the teachers and say, like, use me as that support to improve student learning and to help continue to build that culture of coaching and that culture of being coached?
I guess you sort of have to think about it as a long-term role. I'd say probably really into, let's say, the third year into the sort of process of doing things. I would love to say that I've laid it out in a nice project with a nice timeline, but that's not the reality. It's more ad hoc and sort of moving with the flows of things. And I guess of building those experiences, it's sort of, I see it as a long-term thing of, if you think traditionally about the role of a tech integrator, let's say, that I want to move away from that traditional role of thinking about, hey, I can provide cool experiences and I can fix stuff. And I want to get to the stage where we're having really engaging discussions with professionals talking about how we're going to help improve student learning in that classroom. And looking at sort of how we can sort of play that over time. So let's say building the culture of coaching of, let's say traditionally people saw the role of, hey, I can fix it. Well, what can we do to sort of empower faculty members or staff to start taking those skills on? So for us, it was a big push when I sort of moved back in to use the Google Educators program as we sort of adopted Google Apps, and sort of encouraging teachers to do training, and I ran trainings and still do, and take the different certifications of level 1 and level 2. And we're about 55 faculty members on this campus alone. We've got either level 1 or level 2. And that sort of really had a really big impact on, obviously, the baseline skills of all teachers have improved, but also the type of questions that come in for the support aspect, I guess, of how do I do this, of not just with Google Apps, but actually with all things, of just taking on that mindset of, oh, I actually can do it. So building the culture is sort of in that way of we've opened up a little bit more time in that way, because we've redistributed the support network. So if a teacher is unsure how to do things, there is someone next door, most likely, who does know how to do it, and it's become part of the culture to ask each other. So that's allowed more time. I guess I'm at an advantage as well. I'm also, in my role as ATC or EdTech coordinator, I'm on the leadership team of this campus. So it means that I'm involved in discussions about learning at their onset. So I can sort of help sort of discuss, okay, let's how I think we can build this coaching culture. Can we add sort of coaching conversations to how professional growth models are run? Can we do it how team meetings are run? Can we start sort of having more discussions about moderating student work? So getting the building blocks of having more professional discussions comes in because I'm a member of that team. So I guess that there's sort of two indirect ways that have been able to build a sort of a coaching culture in that way. Sort of a more direct sort of way is just repositioning myself in my role of out of my own headspace of I need to go and fix everything, to let's actually start engaging into what learning do you want to accomplish when we're talking about this new app, and then actually get into the nitty gritty of what's the thing you want to achieve, and then thinking about the app afterwards. And like we're doing that right now with how do we want to document student learning. And yes, we could switch straight to Pictor or switch to any other service, but the discussion that's going on and sort of we're able to step back of going, well, what's the purpose? What are the goals of the project? How do we want to share it with parents? And then talking about what tool we're going to use. So it's been a sort of a long-term shift, but it's been a sort of a repositioning of how I'm involved in the discussion and what place I come in the discussion. So that answer it?
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is like the dream of what all coaches or most coaches that I talk to want to be, is that having those deep, meaningful conversations with staff about how do we improve, enhance, transform student learning, and then get to the tools after.
Yeah.
Did you find it was a real challenge to kind of make this mental switch for yourself, or was it like very natural, or is it part of the culture of the school? Like, how did you get started moving in that direction?
I think it's personal interest. So starting up at NIST and sort of talking about cognitive coaching models and various different ways of thinking about how to impact student learning and how to improve sort of professional development. And then at school, I was working with school reform initiatives on protocols and intentional learning communities. And then I was doing sort of side reading beside there and reading about your work as well about coaching. And it was something I was interested over time. So it was a professional goal of mine ever since I actually came back to Zurich as a teacher and as a tech person, of how did it sort of play over time? Was it a challenge? I guess the hardest challenge is repositioning yourself in the eyes of faculty. Again, if you look a long-term view of someone who's been at school, and I've been involved with this school for quite a while, of when I first did it, there was a computer lab, I ran lessons. Then I went into their room and ran lessons. Then I had a flexible schedule, and all these evolutions has meant that the role I'm filling currently has looked very different in their eyes. And sort of ensuring that I'm fulfilling the needs of the people who are working with the students, the faculty, more directly, that I'm fulfilling their needs first, as well as trying to reposition the role and sort of that constant sort of balance between, hey, I need this to work, versus let's have a deep conversation of learning. And sort of, it's an evolutionary thing, I think, of slowly sort of, you have the first discussion and it might not be so deep, and then you have the next one that gets a little deeper, and you just have to play around with that sort of thing. And I think that way of doing a relationship model where we sit down as a team and discuss how our relationships are developing, and sort of we have a semi-coaching discussion separately of going, okay, this is the move I did, and I can see our relationships deepening. So we're reflecting on the process of our own growth, but also the growth of those relationships has enabled the gap between what a teacher thinks I'm doing and what I really am doing get close together, I hope.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I hope.
So I don't know if this next question is going to really apply to you based on the way that you've been talking about your school, but one of the things that I know that coaches struggle with, because questions they ask me all the time, is I feel so demotivated because I'm the only one in my school that is passionate about technology for learning. I'm the coach, they hired me, there's just one of me, I don't have anyone to work with. So the question is, how do you stay motivated when maybe you're the only one who really cares about this? It sounds like you're not the only one in your school, so that might be a tough question, but you might have been in that situation before.
Yeah, I definitely have been in that situation before, and I'm sure everyone has over the evolution, if in this role, over the various evolution of the role, you get to that point of either just being an advocate for let's get this new device, or being an advocate for let's try this new experience, to let's deepen the discussion of, it's sort of a broader question of when you're one of the voices shouting in the room of, hey, let's have a look at this, and you feel like no one else is hearing, how do you stay motivated, I guess? And I guess that's been sort of part of the process for me of seeing it more longer term, and sort of seeing the growth of the role as a longer term thing, as opposed to purely meeting people's needs in this moment and getting that short term gain. So like, let's say with curriculum now for years, all roles, I guess, been involved in sort of how do you get digital citizenship embedded. And yes, I could run all the lessons myself, I could build all the resources myself, I've done all those sort of things, but how do you actually get those soft skills, research skills, digital citizenship skills on the table when people are planning units and have collective sort of responsibility of it? And I've tried in various different ways, and sort of, I guess the way that I sort of have stayed motivated, I had a hard time in previous iterations, but staying motivated is seeing the small gains that you can make over time of, hey, let's, like for us, of just getting all the tech coaches on the same page of what we believe, getting all the librarians on the same page of what we believe, getting the tech coaches and librarians on the same page and seeing the evolution of the process and celebrating those small gains, as opposed to saying, hey, I haven't got to my endpoint all the way. So it's that ability to sort of break down goals and, hey, I'm in no way an expert on it, but it's something maybe as I get older or I've had kids, starting to see those small gains has become a really motivating factor for me. In the past, I used to strive of, hey, let's do this massive project and I know I've succeeded once I'm done, but then celebrating those small things.
I think your example of digital citizenship is maybe something that will resonate with a lot of teachers and coaches. And again, how do you put that in a meaningful and integrated way that is actually part of the unit or the learning in a way that makes sense? And I really like what you're saying about earlier about sort of repositioning yourself, not as talking about experiences, but talking about the learning. And that when you're talking about digital citizenship, it's like, how do you reposition what we're saying about digital citizenship, not as it's a computer tech skill or it's something that the ed tech coach deals with, but how do you build that into your mentoring, or how do you build that into your homeroom or advisory or whatever you call it? How do you build that into your child protection and student safety, or then make it reposition that so it truly is integral?
It's all those paracurricular. It's all that paracurricular that everyone knows it has to be done, but how do you, like again, this the question from the beginning for me of how do you know you're impacting student learning, and how do you know it's making a difference? Yes, we could run, let's say, child protection sessions or a digital citizenship session, but how do you know that's actually impacting student learning and making a difference and they're retaining it?
Right.
For us, actually all schools, but kids are great at parroting back, I shouldn't talk to strangers, I shouldn't do this, I shouldn't share my password. If someone says something mean on a chat group, I know I shouldn't do anything. People are great at parroting that back, but how do you get to actual real learning about that and them applying those skills over time? And yes, knowing that mistakes will be made, but actually using each experience as a learning moment to grow over time. So interesting.
Changing gears here, have you ever had the experience of sort of your role as a coach being misunderstood? Like, what is it that you do, Will? And
totally.
How do you help teachers see what it is that you do? How do you overcome that challenge?
I think it's actually been even more of a challenge over recent years than it was traditionally, as you sort of, for me, as the role of EdTech person, coach, integrator, whatever role it was at that stage, I was much more visible in what I did of running a lesson or doing this and those are things. But as the role has evolved, we're an iPad school, as teachers become more comfortable in using all the resources, the number of sessions I run or co-teach to support the tech structure of it have decreased dramatically. And so in recent years, I wonder, not that teachers have wondered enough, maybe they do wonder, but they haven't expressed it to me. I wonder what they perceive I'm doing during the day. And I think that's sort of getting at your question. I think for me, it's been a more recent challenge. And how do I get over it? I try to be very sort of transparent with the process that I'm doing. So be it working with an instructional coaching hat of, I'm working with these people, I'll let people know that I'm working with those people. These are the sort of things I'm working on. If, hey, I've got a big back-end tech sort of thing to set up all the blogs, I'll sort of document and share that within the community of going, okay, these things are done. Not to document my time in per se, of going, hey, this is what I've done, you should see what I've done. But let people know, okay, all the blogs are set up now, all the passwords are set up, they're ready to go. If you want a lesson or you want support doing stuff, just let me know. So trying to be as transparent as possible about the things I'm doing, which are usually in the background, and sort of moving forward with those. I guess it's I don't know if there's a good way of helping faculty see all the things that are happening back there. I sort of try and I love collecting data about things, and I do survey faculty a couple of times a year just to see what perceptions are and sort of levels of support that have been provided. And I think things haven't really changed over time. People obviously miss having those lessons that I would run or me doing those things for me. But I think with the relationship-driven model, our connections are very different from what they used to be. That I can, like today, a teacher just came in to the office where I was standing and unprovoked just talked about an experience they want to run and wanted just my feedback on it and just ideas to bounce ideas off. So while I'm not running that lesson with them or co-teaching with them, we're having a lot more of those, let's call it water cooler conversations, but actually about professional learning as opposed to what we did on the weekend. So I guess that's allowing teachers to see what I'm doing more because I'm making more connections with people in a different way. But if you let's say you surveyed the whole faculty, would they be able to describe what I do? I don't know.
So many things that you said jumped out at me, but one of the first thing that's like coming to my mind right now is that idea of like being transparent and being explicit about what you do and when you're doing it. And I think that can be really hard for coaches because a lot of times I think we think people must know what we do already, or maybe we don't want to like burden them with that information, or we don't want to seem like we're showing off. But actually teachers are busy. They don't know anything about what we're doing. And once you kind of explain it or share it in a way that is palatable and not saying like, look at how much work I'm doing, I think people recognize that maybe that time that you're not physically in the classroom doesn't mean you're sitting in your office like twiddling your thumbs. But there's a fine balance of how you say that, because I've had quite a few teachers come to me and tell me how other coaches have told them how busy they are, and the way that they say it is probably not the way they wanted to say it.
I find it really funny because my office has a big window and everyone walks past, which is great. But there are days where, let's say most of the day I'll be at my computer and I wonder what people think. And that sort of outward sort of facing perception, I promise I'm doing work. But that outward facing perception, oh, he's been at the computer all day, is really interesting dichotomy of the job, I guess. It's just an interesting thing to get around at how you build relationships. And I feel sort of the relationship model has helped me come to terms personally with me doing less of that in-class support, sort of traditional integration style stuff. So.
You alluded a little bit before about all the different hats that you wear. How would you classify some of those big hats that you wear as a coach at Zurich?
Yeah, no, there's big hats there. Like so obviously there's the coaching hat, which, so as I said, I became really sort of self-aware, I guess. I'm actually personally concerned about, I wonder what people think about my role. So I actually started tracking when I was wearing these different hats a couple of years ago, just to sort of see for myself, how was I spending my time? Was I using a coaching stance? I'll track that. Am I there just to consult or help plan a unit? Let's use that hat there. Am I there co-teaching and playing those different stuff? And what I realized, one of the hats I didn't acknowledge, I guess, was, I called it administrative, but let's call it departmental stuff of setting up, I'm going to keep using blog servers, but it doesn't have to be blog servers, setting up back-end stuff and ensuring the systems are in place to enable effective teaching and student learning. And actually sort of coming to terms of that is one of my responsibilities. And in order for all the other hats to work, that one has to sort of be raised the profile. So it was a really sort of interesting experience of just tracking the different stances I was using at different times during the day, and realizing that part of your role, and sort of part of my role is actually administrative, being part of a leadership team, making sure systems work, and then also co-teaching, planning, and also coaching with people. So different times I move in different stages inside there, and I still personally, only for a personal interest level, I do track those sort of things over time, just as a way to keep me aware of how I am spending my time. So does that answer your question?
It does. Yeah. I'm just thinking a little bit about when and where you provide kind of visionary leadership, or is that, I know you're the coach. I also know I think you're a technology director. Like, where does the visionary leadership of educational technology and modern learning environments come from? Is that also what you feel is part of your role, or are you also?
I did I classify that under admin, so I shouldn't do that. No, I shouldn't say it like that. No, for me, so I'm part of the leadership team of the lower school, which is curriculum leaders, assistant principals, principal, and student support. So in that way, we have bi-weekly meetings where we discuss the pedagogical direction of the school. So I'm involved in that aspect. So that's one sort of aspect and the role, and I work on projects actually totally unrelated to tech. Usually it's actually just a byproduct of it all. So be it assessment or reporting, working on those projects with that team. And yes, I bring in the lens of technology-rich learning and technology documentation, but the driver is the learning. And then I play the support role. On the broader sort of ed tech side of things, in our sort of tech department, we have a tech director and we have 3 ETCs, tech coaches, and at the different divisions that we have here. And we meet 3 weekly, I think it is, maybe monthly. And that's where we discuss sort of, yesterday, we had a meeting yesterday where we were discussing digital responsibility and how to build that in the curriculum and how does the interplay work with curriculum leaders who are developing curriculum in different subject areas, and where does sort of digital responsibility fit into that puzzle, and how can we leverage the discussion. So as in that visionary side of leadership, it's actually, because I'm a member of those 2 teams, they're the platforms to do it, and because it works in the overall structure of the school, it allows us to have a seat at the table, I guess, at different tables.
I think your point about it fitting into the overall structure of the school is so critical. And I think lots of coaches would really want to be in the position you're in of being on the leadership team at your divisional level. I mean, I think most coaches would be part of the school-wide ed tech team, but being in those conversations on the lower school leadership, I mean, that shows right there that your school values technology as a tool for learning at such a level that you're on that team. I mean, I think that's awesome.
And I like internally in our lower school department, so me and other people in the office, sort of our sort of defining goals and sort of areas we work in is the whole concept of user independence being the first one, developing smooth systems and sort of fostering relationships. So that, in a way, that's actually how we define how we do our work during the time of, are we working towards helping users become more independent? Are we helping develop smoother systems so it becomes more efficient of pushing iPad apps, whatever it has to be? Or then are we working to develop fostering relationships? So we use that as our lens to look at our work, as opposed to necessarily hats to think about what role we're in. We're trying to work towards those overarching things, I guess. Yeah.
You mentioned how much you enjoy tracking data. That was about your particular role as a coach and the different hats that you wear. What kind of data do you track, or do you use, or do you help teachers track to evaluate kind of the impact of coaching in the classroom, and also help teachers see opportunities for improvements or changes? Like, what do you track? What do you do with that data? What does that kind of look like in terms of enhancing and improving student learning?
Lots of things. So I do enjoy data and sort of different ways to track different things. So as a department about relationships, we track our sort of relationship, the level of tech comfort, and the level of sort of tech integration, purely informal, and just to sort of keep us aware of how we're moving towards things. So we track that sort of data of how we're working towards there. We do, not quarterly, and we do 2 surveys in the year at Christmas time, at the end of the year, to just get general feedback of the department and sort of level of support that is being provided. We track that over time. As a school, let's go coaching. And so let's say I'm wearing my coaching hat. I use Diane Sweeney's model of student-centered coaching as the main driver and the supporting there. And again, that's another relationship-driven model. And in those relationships, I work towards developing, sorry, someone's come in the room, of course. Thought I got it. So I start tracking the relationships, and we work towards setting a student-centered goal. And in class, we work out at the very beginning, what is the goal and how do we track if we've achieved it? So then we start developing usually formative assessments, exit tickets, various different things to find out how, as a team or the teacher themselves, are working towards that goal. Often in these sort of coaching conversations, actually for all of them, tech hasn't actually been the number one driver. And I guess that fits in. Again, I'm lucky because I have the background of classroom teaching that I'm comfortable with allowing the goal not to be tech. It could be, hey, I want to improve how math instruction is shared and how do they get their main concept in mathematics. But in a way, I'm able to weave in technology. So with a teacher I was working with last year, they wanted to sort of try cafeteria split screen teaching, making sure you get across the main concept of maths and sort of the transdisciplinary learning outside of it. And as part of that process, teachers developed really sort of interesting resources which kids could use over time to track their learning, which were all tech-based. So through Classroom, through Google Slides, I was able to leverage the student-centered goal to integrate technology inside it. So we track that process over there and would share the resources and sort of successes out after that process. How else do we track? As a school, we track tech usage across school because we're part of the International Research Collaborative, IRC, where a series of questions on the survey is, it's actually from grade 5 to grade 12, where students track their perception of how they use technology in different subjects, and teachers track how they think they use technology in there, and we do data analysis protocols, examining the data that comes from there to see sort of trends over time and to see if teachers' perceptions match by student realities, those sort of things. So I guess we sort of explore data from different angles. I guess sort of to summarize it, my main sort of driver is how do we know it's impacting student learning? The data I'm trying to collect each time is how do I know we're developing relationships? We track that data. To how do we know that students are working towards this student-centered goal with a teacher? Let's track that data inside there. So always asking, no matter how you define students, if it's just faculty or a big project or students themselves, continually asking that question of how do you know it's having an impact? Very long-winded answer.
I like how all this stuff that Clint, I like how all the stuff you're talking about with teachers was a lot of students tracking their learning over time, and also you talked about like in-class formative assessments, exit tickets, those kinds of things to help identify if you're meeting the goal. I think one thing that we struggle with in schools in general is this idea that there has to be like some exam, like the ISA exam or something, and that's how we can tell whether or not we're improving student learning. All of the examples that you listed, and I tried to type them all up in the show notes while you were talking, they're all very like practical, informing our practice on a day-to-day basis, not this big like one-stop shop of let's see, did we tick the box? And I think that is what makes data collection and reflection on that data actually purposeful and useful, and not just that ticking box thing that we get in schools so much.
I think it's sort of run in parallel, like with something I said earlier about how to sort of stay motivated over time. I guess it's been that evolution of seeing those small gains, and I guess that's been reflected in how I work as well, of celebrating those small gains, be it with the department or with the teacher you're working with or the students. It's really interesting to track it over time. We've been playing with, we're not a PYP school anymore, but tracking, how do you track sort of development of sort of character-based standards over time and stuff like that with class, and how do you document? It's really interesting seeing the different ways kids do it, but also getting them to think about the meta side of it all, of how is it growing over time, is a really interesting sort of play on it. As it involves tech as a supporting thing, but not the driving thing. So that's what I mean of how I've been able to reposition my role over time, of I'm being able to have these conversations, not about the tech, about the learning, which is a really interesting place to be.
I think you're really highlighting the benefits of being in a school for a long period of time. I think oftentimes in international schools there is this idea of transiency, but you're in a position now where you can actually see kind of you're reaping what you sowed 3, 4, 5 years ago when you there. And you're right, it is this sort of over time incremental growth. But then when you compare where you are versus where you were as a school, you're like, oh my goodness, that has been an amazing shift, perhaps in mindset or in culture or in procedure or systems that we have, or all of those things. And we are really seeing that benefit to student learning, and also maybe to kind of teacher learning and teacher of what's happening in the classroom. I think that's
I was just having that sort of dose of reality each time of just asking yourself of, if you stood here 4 years ago, would you expect to actually have got as far as you got? And actually sort of thinking back of where you've come from, of, let's say, Google Educator sort of stuff, of when we started that, I think the first 6 months we had me and someone else who did the exam and stuff, and now I've got another 2 people taking it tomorrow. We'll probably be up the whole faculty before the end of the year.
right.
Simply of word of mouth and spreading that way. It's really interesting sort of to reflect on where you've come from.
And that reflection and keeping that in your eye line, I guess, is an important part of your role, because I think it's very easy to forget where we came from, and teachers aren't going to be thinking about that. So I think that's an important, up in the hats section, we were talking about the different hats that you wear. I think that's also a piece too, to not just be the advocate for technology, but be that mirror back to remind us that, look, 2 years ago, this is where we were. Look how far we've come. It's a series of small gains that have brought us to this point.
And it also helps you stay positive and motivated when you do have those questions which you thought people could answer come in, which they do. It's just reality, and you're answering them, but you're doing it in a kind and empathetic way of going, okay, we have come a long way here. Even though I'm answering this question now, it's maybe in the future it's going to change. And answering with empathy and connecting with people on a human level, the reflective side of it and seeing the growth over time really helps with that.
I think you have actually started talking about the next question we want to ask you, and maybe that this is a deeper answer than what the question sounds like, but what are the ways that you make yourself invaluable as a coach? What are the things that teachers love that you do? And you just said answering with empathy and connecting on a personal level. To me, that's got to be something that teachers love that you do. And I don't work with you, but I am assuming that is one of the things that they love. What else do they love that you do, or what other ways do you make yourself invaluable as a coach?
I think it's actually a really hard question, because if I was thinking as a teacher and I sort of had been in school for a while and I'd seen the role, I would have probably I would have rated myself more valuable when I used to run lessons for people, because they were super happy for me to run them and it gave them some time and they didn't have to plan through things. Maybe I've decreased my valuability, how valuable I am over time. Who knows? What I try to do to stay valuable is ensuring sort of that I am there listening with empathy. We, as a school, we have adopted the school reform initiative sort of protocols and sort of the norms that we run meetings by. And there's some things I try and live by is this concept of making room. So ensuring that, hey, different ideas can come in, stepping up and ensuring that, hey, if something's coming on, I can step up to the challenge, seek wisdom if I don't know something, which was a hard one to sort of develop over time, because being the fix-it person is you always have to have an answer for something, but also owning the fact that sometimes things don't work and being honest about it and then just trying to fix it. And that's sort of, how do you make yourself invaluable? That's probably the biggest area, I guess, is being human in the tech side of world, I think, and you were talking about with empathy. That making people see the role that we're here to help support them and support students, as opposed to make systems run and bring the human side back to tech and that sort of concept. I guess that's probably how I make myself invaluable, if people think I'm invaluable. But I guess making sure I'm present and yes, physically present, but also mentally present during planning and pedagogical discussions, that I'm not there carrying an agenda of I want to push tech. I'm there to further discussion about student learning. And if a lens pops up where tech fits in, then I'm happy to pull it in. As opposed, we had an extended planning meeting with a grade level yesterday, and there wasn't a really strong tech connection. It was heavily science-based. Yes, they're going to document it with cameras and stuff like that, but it wasn't a massive tech thing. And I went in there just to discuss learning and try and help bring that discussion along. So getting people to realize that you don't just you carry your tech lens, you don't carry your tech hat all the time, that you're a teacher and you're there as a teacher at the heart of it. I guess if that makes me valuable, that's what I'd do.
I certainly think that if you were teaching in my school, or if you were a coach in my school and I was a teacher, or I was a teacher in your school, I think that's amazing. I think what people need is that support, and I think that consistent focus on student learning, regardless of what your title says. I'm an ed tech coordinator, or I'm a math coach, or I'm a literacy coach, or whatever. Like, the focus is on student learning and how we can contribute to improving student learning in all classrooms for all students at all times. And I think having that support and people understanding that about you, I would imagine that they appreciate and value your input, regardless of whatever it is that they're talking about. I think that's something that shines through for me.
I sort of connect with that. Now I'm thinking more about how the technician's role has been repositioned in this sort of discussion of getting teachers and students to see them not as the fix-it person, that they can run the role of running a session about coding or trying to explore different ways of doing things, of, like you were saying, that not seeing all the coaches just with their one hat on, as seeing that we're all here to help support. Like, the driver of our school is student learning. No matter which role we're in, at the end of the day, it's all about student learning and how best can I do it, and then the side question is, how do I know I'm impacting it?
So for all best intentions, sometimes coaches aren't always successful. So in your opinion, or from your perspective, where is it that you think coaches sometimes fail, and what can we as coaches, or those who support coaches, do to help them be more successful at times?
Let's go with where do they fail, and then we can answer how you can support coaches as they fail. Sort of big area that I think coaches fail, I failed with, probably continue to fail with, is that sort of, like we talked about before, bridging the gap between faculty understanding of the role and the role itself, and expecting faculty members to see the work that you're doing, even though you're not present all the time. And that sort of concept of, can't they see that I am so busy and I'm doing this and I'm doing this, and bridging the gap between perception and reality. And like I said before, I don't think I have an answer to that sort of question, but it's that sort of slow process of slowly transitioning and repositioning the role over time, because it's not going to be a day and night thing where, hey, everyone gets what I'm doing now. And like I said before, I don't know if anyone will ever get to know what the full depth of the role is, or should they? But being transparent about what you do and really explicit about your word and being true to your word is a really important thing of helping to bridge that gap between understanding and reality of what the role is. So I know myself, I've failed in that sort of time of, and it's probably going in with a little bit of arrogance of time, didn't they see that I was doing all that work 2-3 days of setting up, and then they're expecting me there right then at that moment to do something else? And slowly sort of coming to terms with my own internal conflict about it, I guess. That was where I've sort of failed quite often. Obviously, where coaches fail is, for me, again, it was that failing to realize the importance of allowing time to talk about systems and making sure systems were set up efficiently in the background, as opposed to just thinking about, let's run the lesson or let's talk about coaching, but acknowledging, hey, this system needs to work as flawlessly as possible in order for all those other things to be successful. So acknowledging that the technical aspect actually has a large influence on teachers' perceptions of what's working and not, just technology in general, but also the underpinnings of all the other discussions of, if things are working well, people are happy to discuss about other things. If things aren't working well, then they don't want to talk about anything other than the things not working well. Be it your projection, iPads, apps, whatever you want to call it, whatever tech thing you want to insert into that sentence. If those things aren't working, then it's really hard to have the other discussions. So acknowledging that that's important. I guess the other half of your question was, how do you sort of support coaches to fail, it's really important that you have support from administration in some aspect. I know some schools or some coaches have a difficult time with it if, let's say, I don't feel my administration supports this position. Luckily, I've never been in that role, but it doesn't have to necessarily be your direct boss. It could be support of just another colleague who's working in there, of having someone to bounce ideas off, whom usually it's beneficial to have them in a little bit of a higher level of responsibility than you, so you can gain a broader picture of where this could fit into the broader models and the workings of the school. But just allowing them to start, like for me, I always come back to that saying, that coalition of the willing, of realizing that change to a coaching stance is going to take time. You can't just come in there and go, hey, let's go all in for instructional coaching. That for the person who's doing it, they're going to have to learn, so they can't go all in. And for the faculty themselves, that's yet another change for them and the perception of the role. So slowly you're going to have to transition to that positioning of the role. So allowing them to start small and taking the time to see the growth that's happening and celebrate it, share it, more people will come along. And that sort of idea of organic growth and starting with word of mouth, which tech has been great at over the years, of who wants to try out iPads first and get a little trial group and then expanding out from there, using that knowledge, but doing it in an instructional way as opposed to a hard way or a systems way, and start with a small and then celebrate success as it goes out. So if an administrator or a support person can allow the coach to have that and come on the journey, I think it's great.
Everything you've described is I think coach's dream. So for those coaches that are going into a new school, if you were doing it over again, are there any tips you would have for, as you go into a new school, regardless of kind of what the setup might be, what are really important things for coaches to do so they can kind of start down this path that you've described here?
I'll try and address it in different ways. I guess, let's say you're coming to a school and you're like you said, the shining light about it, then I guess there's a different way, and then we can move across the spectrum. So if you're someone coming in and you want to sort of start leveraging yourself and you feel like you're the beginning of the coalition, that you want to sort of get the word out there, of start sort of thinking about, can you sort of eke out or squeeze out, let's say 10% of your time to start having those conversations with people who want to have it. And in every school, there's always someone who is the techie person who's really into sort of dynamic learning, and sort of try and start repositioning yourself just with that person about how you have discussion. Not, hey, have you seen this cool new thing? Let's do it. But actually repositioning of, well, what are you trying to get at with your kids? And then try and reframe those small discussions. Hopefully over time that will expand to more people, maybe word of mouth will come around, and that sort of way of, that's how I would evolve it. If you sort of come in and there is someone supporting you in an administrative level, of really sort of getting to know how it could fit into existing structures, of not going, hey, we need to have a 100% math coach or 100% this, of using the existing structures you have, percentages, I'm talking about sort of faculty percentages, not creating new positions, and sort of thinking about how can we use the positions we currently have to start having these discussions about learning. Be it, how can you use faculty meeting time to actually just bring samples of work and discuss where it's at, or have those broader discussions in a structured type of discussion where everyone's involved, everyone feels their voice is valued, and building in these, you can call them coaching concepts, but into the living framework of the school, alongside developing relationships with teachers, and hopefully over time those connections we made between the teachers and the administration of going, okay, this is really moving our school forward because we're really talking about where students are at and how we can move forward, as opposed to this new curriculum or this new thing. We're actually going a little bit deeper each time. If you get a bonus, how can you get started? If you're really into a school and you already step into a coaching role of going to sort of reading tons of stuff about instructional coaching. For me, it was Diane Sweeney and Jim Knight sort of stuff. And if you go to their training about sort of student-centered and student-directed style coaching, obviously there's a whole spectrum of types of coaching you can offer. student-centered, just connected more with me as a teacher, but also as a tech person, because the discussion became about not the teaching practice, it came about the learning. The teaching practice was part of you use a strategy to help learning, but what strategy the teacher chose wasn't the driver of it. It was what impact you wanted to have, and then stepping back. So having a read of Jim Knight's and Diane Sweeney's work, awesome. If you ever get to go to some school reform initiative stuff about protocol-based learning and stuff like that, also great. But heaps of stuff to recommend.
And I think you've just kind of segged into that final question for us. Like, what is that one resource that you would recommend that has impacted your practice as a coach?
I think
at ISB, we are currently reading that Diane Sweeney book, Student-Centered Coaching.
Student-Centered Coaching. I was going to share the title. So Student-Centered Coaching, Diane Sweeney, High Impact Instruction by Jim Knight, Instructional Coaching by Jim Knight as well. Great places to start. They talk about really practical advice with models of how to structure coaching at different stages of wherever you're at, basically, to be a full-time coach with a lot of support, to full-time coach with no support, to right down the end of the spectrum of I'm just dabbling in it. They're all great places to do, and I found the sort of high impact instruction strategies by Jim Knight, but Marzano's work is the same way of, I found it really useful as a coach to drawing on research-based practices to help support teachers develop their practice and deepen student learning, as opposed to trying to pick out of the air of what strategy we can use, actually using research-driven practices to help move that process forward. As the program sort of, the idea of coaching has evolved, it actually allows different people to use the same base strategies. So let's say more than me just doing coaching, now we're all drawing from the same strategy, so we're all talking the same language. Yes, we're doing it a different way, but the base comes inside there. Another great one, I've got it right here. Conversations, great for work, but also great for your own personal life and how you hold conversations with people in general. Just the importance of how you interact on a human level with people and strategies you can use just to have better conversations. And that whole concept of, the one that sticks with me out of there, of every conversation for both parties should always be life-giving, that everyone should always gain something out of conversation, that I'm not going to a discussion to impart my wisdom on you, of actually seeing people as equal partners, and that concept on that side there. On a personal note, alongside that, I was doing a lot of reading about Brené Brown, Doing Greatly being her sort of starting point of it all, Doing Greatly by Brené Brown, and that sort of her concept from that book, but other books as well, is that concept of admitting your vulnerability, not being overly vulnerable and oversharing and stuff like that, but admitting your vulnerability, admitting, hey, I don't know how to do this, like that whole concept of seeking wisdom and understanding that you, in order to move forward, you do have to be truly vulnerable. Doesn't have to be public oversharing on Facebook and public vulnerability, but admitting to your close network, be it sort of my team, who that's the relationship we're trying to develop, of going, okay, that really didn't work. And then using that as a starting point and sort of finding your network, be it for me, it's online too, but it's also in person, for those people who you can share the ups and downs of the journey in a true way, as opposed to like it probably sounds like through this interview, and I'm thinking back about this interview, that everything works fantastically always, and hey, I live in a great place, which I do, and it's awesome. There's always areas to improve, and that's just part of life, and finding that network and hub of people is a really important thing. So recommendation of how you can improve your practice, have a read of stuff, but then also have a think about who is that network you're drawing on, not just for cool ideas and resources, PLN online, but also who are you willing to go on the journey with and share your warts and all version. Yeah.
Amazing. You've just given me like 7 other books now I feel like I need to read. I've already got a stack of books on my desk, and now I'm just basically doubled that stuff. So thank you very much, Will, for all of the reading work you've just given me.
And thank you so much.
Daring Greatly. It's a great one. Great read.
And thank you so much for all your time today, Will. This was just chock full of so many different ideas and strategies, and like, I think thoughtful prompts for coaches to consider as they like evaluate their role and look towards the growth of their role, whether they're staying in the school or moving on. I think you've provided a really clear framework for how we can grow that coaching culture in a way that is very sustainable and about people, which I think is made this conversation so like warm and fuzzy in my heart.
I hope. I realize as I'm answering this, I've become so less techie.
That was great.
Okay.
Thank you so much for watching our video today. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you'll know when we release a new video each week. At Aduro Learning, as you know, we want to help you coach better. To get you started, we've got a free digital download for you called 5 Strategies for Your Coaching Toolkit right in the description box below. And if you're looking for even more, we now offer private coaching sessions to help you work through any specific issue you might be having as a coach or even just as an educator. Do you have a problem you can't seem to solve? Get your introductory private coaching session for free with us. Learn more at adurolearning.com/private coaching. Thanks for joining us today, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.